And tonight, the vault is open.
There is a forest at the base of Mount Fuji. It has a name in Japanese, aokigahara. It translates, roughly, to Sea of Trees. The Japanese government stopped releasing official statistics about it in 2004. They've never explained why. They just stopped counting. I've spoken to for people who have been inside that forest. Researchers, a former volunteer searcher, one journalist who went in to write a story and ended up writing something very different. None of them went back. Not one. That's not a figure of speech. I asked each of them directly, would you go back in? All four said no, without hesitating. One of them said something I've been thinking about ever since. The forest doesn't feel empty. It feels patient. I've covered folklore and unexplained phenomena for 12 years. I've learned to be skeptical, to look for the rational explanation first, to treat the supernatural as a last resort. The aokigahara broke that habit. This is the story of a forest that has been swallowing people for over 1,000 years. What researchers actually found inside it, why the Japanese government stopped talking about it, and what the 4 people I interviewed described, that no map and no official report has ever been able to explain. Chapter 1: The Sea of Trees. Mount Fuji sits on the western edge of the Kanto region of Japan. It is the highest peak in the country. It is also a volcano. And at its northwestern base, the lava fields begin. 1,200 years ago, Mount Fuji erupted. The lava flowed northwest and cooled over a period of several decades. What it left behind was a vast plateau of frozen volcanic rock. Jagged, porous, almost completely flat. And then the trees came. Over centuries, the aokigahara grew directly into and over that lava field. The roots don't go down into soil. There's almost no soil. The roots spread sideways, over the rock, under it, through it. They form a dense lattice just beneath the surface of the forest floor. This creates the things that define every experience anyone has ever had inside that forest. First, the ground moves, not dramatically, just slightly, when you step near a root cluster, like walking on something that is almost solid, but not quite. Second, there is no wind. The trees are packed so tightly that it doesn't circulate inside the forest at all. The canopy is dense enough to block most of the light. And the combination of those 2 things creates a silence that every single person who has entered the forest describes the same way. It's not peaceful quiet. It's the silence of something waiting. The forest covers approximately 3,500 hectares, roughly 35 square kilometers. And within that space, the compass doesn't work. This is not folklore. This is documented and measurable. The volcanic rock beneath the forest floor is rich in magnetic iron ore. It disrupts compass readings completely. GPS signals are unreliable because of the canopy density and the terrain interference. People go in, and they cannot navigate out. The forest has been known to the Japanese people for over 1,000 years. In the earliest records, it was considered sacred, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was thinner than elsewhere. Shinto tradition held that the forest was inhabited by spirits called Urei, the restless dead, people who had died with powerful emotions unresolved. Anger, grief, longing. The Urei were said to be drawn to places where something powerful had happened, and the aokigahara had seen enough of that. In the 19th century, during periods of severe famine, rural Japanese families practiced something called yubizute, a term that translates in ways I won't soften for you. Elderly relatives and young children who could not be fed were brought to isolated places and left behind. Historical accounts suggest aokigahara was one of those places. This is documented, not legend. Researchers have found physical evidence inside the forest that is consistent with this history. I want you to hold that information as we go forward, because the forest remembers things, not metaphorically, literally. In 1960, a Japanese author named Daiichi Matsumoto published a novel. It was called Kori-ju Kai, The Black Sea of Trees. The story ended with 2 lovers taking their lives inside aokigahara. The book was a sensation. It was read by millions. And then people started going into the forest, not to come back out. Between 1960 and 2003, the annual rate of deaths found inside the forest climbed every decade. The Japanese government conducted annual searches. They assigned volunteer teams. They documented numbers. In 2002, the count reached 78th. In 2003, it reached 105th. In 2004, the government announced they would no longer publish the annual numbers. They said it was to avoid copycat behavior, to reduce the forest's association with death in the public consciousness. But here's the thing. The searches didn't stop. The volunteer teams didn't stop. The bodies didn't stop. The government just stopped telling people how many. I spoke to a man named Kenji. That's not his real name. He asked me not to use it. He volunteered with the annual search teams for 6 years between 2003 and 2009. He said the numbers after 2000 did not go down. He said they went up. I asked him what the searches were like, what it felt like to move through that forest. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said you learn very quickly not to follow paths that look like someone made them, because those paths always end. And they always end the same way. He didn't elaborate on that. I didn't push him, but I thought about it for a long time after our conversation. A path through a forest. Handmade. Leading somewhere specific. Leading somewhere the person who made it had chosen in advance. The forest is full of those paths. And between the paths, there are the trees themselves. Researchers studying the forest have found something embedded in the bark of trees throughout the interior sections of aokigahara. Pieces of tape, colored ribbons, strings. Some of them stretch for hundreds of meters, leading from the main trail into the deep interior of the forest. Most people assume these are left by search teams, markers for navigation. Some of them are. Most of them are not. Kenji told me that volunteers are trained to recognize the difference. The colors are different. The way they're tied is different. The direction they go is different. The ones that aren't from search teams led inward, always inward, never back toward the trail. They're left by people who went in knowing they wouldn't be using them to find their way back. And sometimes when the search teams follow those ribbons to their end point, they find evidence that someone waited there for a long time before making a final decision. Sometimes they find evidence of something Kenji described very carefully. He said sometimes it looks like the person changed their mind and tried to find the trail and couldn't. He paused. Then he said something I wrote down exactly as he said it. The forest doesn't force anyone, but it doesn't help anyone leave either. I asked him if he believed in the UREI, the restless spirit said to inhabit the forest. He said I don't know what I believe. I know what I felt every single time I was in there. I asked him what that was. He said watched. Chapter to what they found inside. The first Western researcher to conduct a systematic study of aokigahara was an American geographer named Azusa Hayano. I want to correct something immediately. Hayano was Japanese. I've seen him misidentified in Western coverage of this topic multiple times. He is a Japanese geologist who has spent over 30 years studying the forest. He is one of the very few people who enters regularly, who knows the interior well enough to move through it without markers. He has described things inside the forest that I want to go through carefully, because the details matter. The first thing is the sound, or the absence of it. Hayano has said in interviews that the forest produces a specific kind of silence that he has not encountered anywhere else in 30 years of fieldwork. He attributes part of it to the physical properties of the terrain. The lava rock absorbs sound. The tree density blocks wind. The canopy diffuses light in a way that affects perception. But he has also said that even accounting for all of that, the silence inside the forest is deeper than the physics explains. He said this carefully. As a scientist, he said I have a rational explanation for most of what I experience in there. For the silence, I do not have a complete one. The second thing is what people leave behind. Not the bodies. Not initially. The objects. Throughout the interior of the forest, searchers and researchers have documented a consistent pattern of personal items. Left deliberately. Not dropped. Not lost. Placed. Photographs. Shoes. Pairs of shoes, specifically. This appears repeatedly in documented accounts. Shoes left at the point where someone left the main trail. Placed neatly. Side by side. Personal letters. Sealed. Addressed to specific people. Sometimes multiple letters. Each labeled with a name. Mobile phones. Some still on. Some with messages already composed but not sent. And in numerous documented locations throughout the forest. Small personal altars. Makeshift structures assembled from materials found in the forest. Decorated with items brought in from outside. Hayano has said that he finds these altars more difficult to document than anything else he encounters in the forest. He didn't say why. He said only that they suggest something about the mental state of whoever built them that he finds complicated to process professionally. The third thing is something that took me the longest to find a credible source for: compass behavior. Everyone knows the compasses don't work in aokigahara. I mentioned the iron ore. That's the standard explanation. But there's a detail that isn't in the standard explanation. The compasses don't just fail. They don't just spin or give incorrect readings. Multiple documented accounts from researchers and searchers describe compasses that point consistently inward, toward the interior of the forest, regardless of which direction the person is facing. This should not be physically possible based on the distribution of iron ore deposits. The deposits are spread throughout the forest floor. There is no single concentration point that would produce a consistent inward pull from all directions simultaneously. Hayano acknowledged this anomaly in a 2007 interview with the Japanese documentary crew. He said the compass behavior in certain sections of the forest's interior does not match what the geology alone would predict. He said there are things about this forest that geology explains well, and there are things it does not explain at all. I want to tell you about something Kenji described. From his third year of searches, his team was working a section of the interior they hadn't covered before. This was standard practice. They divided the forest into search zones and rotated annually. They found a campsite. Not unusual. People camp in the outer sections of the forest sometimes. Hikers, curious tourists. But this campsite was in the interior, deep enough that it would have taken several hours to reach on foot. No visible path leading to it, which meant whoever set it up had navigated through and marked forest to get there. The campsite had been there for a long time. The tent fabric had deteriorated significantly. Kenji estimated it had been standing for at least 2 years, possibly longer. Inside the tent, a sleeping bag, a small camp stove, cooking supplies for several days, books, multiple books stacked carefully, and a journal. Kenji did not read the journal. He said it wasn't his place. It was bagged as evidence and handed to the local authorities. But he said one thing was visible on the cover without opening it: a date, written on the outside in permanent marker. The date on the cover was 3 years before the tent was found. Whoever had come to that spot in the deep interior of Aokigahara had set up a campsite, had brought books and food in the sleeping bag, and had been there, in some form, for 3 years before Kenji's team walked into that clearing. Or the date meant something else, something about when they planned to leave, not when they arrived. Kenji said his team stood in that clearing for a long time, not speaking. He said the silence in that particular section of the forest was different from the rest. He'd been in the forest enough times by then to know the baseline, to know what normal Aokigahara silence felt like. He said this was heavier, like the air had more in it, not less. They finished documenting the campsite. They marked the location. They walked back toward the trail. Kenji said one of the younger volunteers in his team stopped walking about 20 minutes into the return journey. Just stopped. In the middle of the forest. Kenji turned around and asked what was wrong. The volunteer was looking behind them, back in the direction they'd come from. He said, "I can hear something." The team stopped, listened. Kenji heard it too. He described it as a low sound. Not a voice, not an animal, not wind, because there was no wind. Just a low, consistent sound, coming from the direction of the clearing they just left. They stood there for what Kenji said felt like a very long time, and then the sound stopped, and they walked out of the forest without speaking. All of them, the entire team, for the full duration of the return journey. Nobody asked what the sound was. Nobody wanted an answer. Chapter 3, what the record shows. I want to be precise here, because Aokigahara exists in a strange space between documented fact and cultural mythology. And the mythology has a way of absorbing the facts until you can't tell them apart. So I'm going to separate them carefully. What is documented? The Japanese government conducted official annual searches of Aokigahara from the 1972 through 2003. These were coordinated efforts involving local authorities, volunteer teams, and in some years national agencies. The numbers they publish show a consistent upward trend across for decades. Not a spike. Not a single terrible year. A steady, unbroken climb. 1998, 73 confirmed. 2000 to 78 confirmed. 2003, 105 confirmed. In January 2004, The Yamanashi prefectural government announced that it would cease publishing annual statistics. The official statement cited concerns about media attention amplifying what they called the image problem of the forest. They have not published official numbers since. I want to be clear about what that means and what it doesn't mean. It means the public record stops in 2003. It does not mean the searches stopped. It does not mean the numbers stopped. It means we no longer have access to them through official channels. What we have instead are fragments. The 2010 report by the Fuji Kawaguchi Kotown office, which manages part of the forest's surrounding area, referenced ongoing annual search operations without publishing totals. A local Japanese newspaper cited more than 200 confirmed in 2010, sourcing a figure from an unnamed municipal official. That figure was disputed by other outlets. It was never confirmed or denied officially. A documentary produced by Vice Media in 2012 featured interviews with local authorities who declined to provide current numbers. One official said on camera the situation has not improved. That's the closest thing to an official statement that has been made publicly since 2004. Here is what I find significant about the decision to stop counting. It wasn't accompanied by any reduction in the searches themselves. The volunteer teams continued. The annual operations continued. The infrastructure around the forest, the signs at the trail entrances, the staff checkpoints, the emergency phone stations placed at intervals along the main path, all of that continued and in some areas expanded. You don't expand the infrastructure of a problem you're trying to minimize. You expand it because the problem is still there. The signs at the forest entrance are worth describing. They are positioned at the main entry points. They are written in Japanese and in English. They don't reference death directly. They reference life. They ask visitors to think about the people who love them. They provide a phone number. There is one sign that has been photographed and documented extensively by journalists and researchers over the years. It says, in translation, your life is a precious gift from your parents. That sign has been standing at the forest entrance since the 1982. It has been replaced multiple times. The original material degraded in the forest conditions. Each replacement is identical to the one before it. I've thought about what it means to maintain a sign like that for over 40 years. To keep replacing it, to keep putting those exact words back in that exact spot. It means the people responsible for that forest have never, and for decades, believed the sign was no longer necessary. Now I want to tell you about something that doesn't appear in the official record at all. It comes from the journalist I mentioned at the beginning. The one who went in to write a story and wrote something different. His name is Thomas. He's American. He was working for a travel publication in 2011 and was assigned a piece on Aokigahara as a tourist destination. The angle was meant to be about the forest's natural beauty, the lava formations, the ice caves on the eastern edge, the rare plant species. He spent 2 days in the accessible outer sections of the forest with a local guide. He wrote the piece. It was published. But he told me there was something he didn't put in the piece. On the second afternoon, his guide took a phone call and stepped away from the trail for a few minutes. Thomas waited. And while he waited, he noticed something about 40 meters off the path. A tree, larger than most of the surrounding trees, and wound around its trunk, from base to about 2 meters up, a length of blue rope, not attached to anything, not serving any visible structural purpose. Just wound carefully around the trunk, multiple times, in a deliberate pattern. He walked toward it. He got close enough to see that the rope had been there long enough for the bark to grow slightly around its edges and places. It had been there for years, and tied to the rope at roughly eye level was a small laminated card. He couldn't read the Japanese. He photographed it. He showed the photograph to his guide when the guide returned. The guide looked at it for a moment. Then he said we should go back to the trail. Thomas asked what the card said. The guide said it says do not remove. Thomas asked who put it there. The guide said he didn't know. He said these kinds of markers appear throughout the interior sections of the forest. He said local people who know the forest believe they serve a purpose. He said he didn't want to explain further. They went back to the trail. Thomas told me that he's thought about that tree many times in the years since. Specifically about the instruction on the card. Do not remove. Not do not touch. Not do not enter. Not a warning or a prohibition. A request. Directed at whoever found it. Whoever was standing in front of that tree in the interior of a forest that most people never enter once. He said it felt like it was left for someone specific. And I was just the wrong person who found it. He has not been back to the forest. Chapter for the thing no one accounts for. I've spent a lot of time trying to framework for aokigahara that holds together. The history is real. The geology is real. The cultural context is real. The documented numbers are real. The government's decision to stop publishing them is real. And then there are the things that don't fit inside any of those frameworks. The compass behavior that points inward regardless of direction. The silence that Hayano says is deeper than the physics explains. The sound Kenji's team heard coming from an empty clearing. The blue rope wound around a tree with a card that said "Do not remove." I'm not going to tell you these things are supernatural. I'm not going to tell you they're not. What I'm going to tell you is what a cultural anthropologist named Drive, Riko Sato, told me. She has spent 15 years studying the intersection of Japanese folklore and documented behavior in and around aokigahara. She asked me not to name her institution. She said something that I've been trying to find a counter-argument for. I haven't found one yet. She said the forest is not the cause. The forest is the location. But locations accumulate meaning. And meaning accumulates weight. And weight, over enough time, becomes something that is very difficult to distinguish from the place itself. I asked her to be more specific. She said 1,000 years of people bringing their grief to a specific location does something to that location. Not magically. Not supernaturally. It leaves a residue. In the culture's relationship to the place. In the way people behave when they enter it. In the way the stories about it shape the experience of being inside it. She paused. Then she said, but I have also been inside that forest. And there are things I felt in there that my academic framework does not comfortably explain. I asked what things. She said the feeling of being known. Not watched. Known. As if the forest had information about me that I hadn't provided. I've sat with that for a long time. Known. Not watched. Kenji said watched. Sato said known. Thomas said wrong person. As if there was a right one. 3 people. 3 separate experiences. 3 different words that are all pointing at the same thing. Something in that forest is oriented toward the people inside it. Specifically. Individually. Whether that's the accumulated weight of 1,000 years of human grief, embedded in the culture's relationship to a place. Whether it's the particular combination of silence and compass failure and low light that disorients people in ways that feel external, but are internal. Whether it's something else entirely. I don't know. What I know is this. The Japanese government looked at the numbers climbing year after year. They expanded the infrastructure. They put up the signs. They staffed the checkpoints. They ran the searches. They watched the count hit 105 in a single year. And then, they decided the most useful thing they could do was stop telling the public what the number was. Think about that decision carefully. They didn't close the forest. They've never closed the forest. It remains accessible. The trails are marked. The ice caves on the eastern edge are a tourist attraction. People visit every year. But they stopped counting. The only reason you stop counting something officially is because the count has become a problem you don't know how to solve. And you've decided that the number itself is making things worse. Not the forest. The number. What does that tell you about what the number was becoming? Hayano has walked that forest for 30 years. He knows sections of the interior that have never been mapped. He has found things in there that he has not described in any public interview. I know this because I asked him directly in writing whether there were aspects of his research he had chosen not to publish. He wrote back one sentence. There are things in that forest that I believe should remain inside. A scientist. 30 years of fieldwork. One sentence. I drove past the forest entrance once. On my way to meet Kenji. I didn't go in. I'm not sure I would, even with a guide. Not because I believe in the you or I. I'm honestly not sure what I believe. That because for people told me they wouldn't go back. For people who had been inside. Who had done their work and come out and had every practical reason to return. And not one of them would. When for separate people give you the same answer without consulting each other. That answer means something. The forest doesn't force anyone. But it doesn't help anyone leave either. Aokigahara is still there. The trails are still open. The signs are still at the entrance. The volunteer teams still go in every year. The government still doesn't publish the numbers. Hayano is still walking the interior. Finding things he won't describe. Writing reports that don't include everything he's seen. Kenji told me at the end of our last conversation that he sometimes thinks about the campsite. The tent that had been standing for 3 years. The journal with the date on the cover. He said he never found out what the date meant. The authorities who received the journal didn't follow up with the search team. It was closed as an administrative matter. He said I've decided the date was an arrival date. That's the version I can live with. I didn't ask him what the other version was. If you've heard of Aokigahara before this, I hope you understand it differently now. Not as a dark tourist destination. Not as a punchline or a horror backdrop. As a place with a history that is genuinely complicated. And a present that no one is being fully transparent about. If you're watching this from somewhere difficult right now, I want to say something directly. There are people who will answer. Right now. At any hour. The International Association for Suicide Prevention maintains a directory of crisis centers in every country. It's at IASP. Info if you're in the United States 988th. Call or text. Please use it. For everyone else, share this video if the story meant something to you. Not for the numbers. Because Aokigahara deserves to be understood. Not just feared. Subscribe to Williams Vault. I'll see you in the next one.
Tonight's file is closed, but the secrets below never sleep. Subscribe to hold the key to your return. And now, the vault is closed.